Oh, very good. All right. So this is going to be the panel on engineering, and my name is Stephen Graves. I've been essentially a passionate pursuit of translating technology into the marketplace in the area of engineering my entire career. I am the founder or co-founder of Binu Bio. I am also currently the Associate Dean for Research and Innovation for the University of New Mexico. And so I hold both of those roles. I'm no longer totally involved with the company. I'm mainly at UNM, but I would like to introduce our panel, our distinguished panel of entrepreneurs, and I'll let them introduce themselves. But each of them have been commercializing an engineering-based technology. And so with that, I'll ask Chris to introduce himself and his company and just the basics of the company.
So I'm Chris Vetro, the Chief Scientific Officer at Flow Aluminum. And at Flow Aluminum, we're commercializing the technology that I happened to partially invent in my dissertation as part of my thesis. So we're, closing in on 2 years old now. It's been fun. We're early. It's a long road for batteries, but it's been a good time.
My name is Paul Short. I'm a co-founder with Tom Stevenson, who many of you know of Pajarito Powder. I have a long entrepreneurial background, but Pajarito is a very New Mexico-born company. It's a born and raised company that I'm looking forward to telling you guys about.
Hey everyone, I'm Hunter McDaniel, founder and CEO of Ubiquity. We're a spinoff from Los Alamos National Lab up in Los Alamos. 10-year overnight success, I guess. Actually founded the company about 10 years ago based on technology that I was also co-inventor on at Los Alamos. We're also licensing some IP from MIT, University of Washington. Our core technology relates to what are called quantum dots. These are fluorescent materials that are highly tunable. So any application where light is being converted, absorbed, quantum dots can probably make it more efficient. They're widely used in TVs today to make the display more color accurate and energy efficient. And we're kind of taking the technology to new markets, focused mainly in sunlight optimization. So our first product line is a greenhouse technology called UbiGrow that changes the spectrum of sunlight to enhance crop yields. So it's shifting basically the center of the spectrum from the sun, from the green, over to the red where chlorophyll absorbs more strongly. We also have a big program in solar. We have a partnership with the largest solar company in the world, and also some other kind of niche applications, including anti-counterfeit security inks. So we're a Series B stage company. We haven't actually announced that yet, but we closed the Series B last year, and about 42 employees up on the hill. Flirting with profitability, but we're growing quickly. So, focus more on growth than profitability right now, but I'm happy to tell you more about it during the Q&A.
Okay. The first question is just, could you tell the audience where you're at, what the next stage is, and what is the advantage of being in New Mexico for you? And let's go in reverse order. So you kind of hit that already a little bit, Hunter, but more detail.
Yeah, so we're in kind of like I don't want to call it hyper growth, but rapid growth mode right now. Our main problem is production capacity. We've got way more demand than we can supply in some of these very large area applications like greenhouses and utility scale solar. And so we're really focused on the next stage of expanding our production, looking for manufacturing sites here in the state. Probably will be multiple. And what goes along with that is the need for working capital and CapEx financing. So we have been raising money. We'll be able to talk more about that publicly in the next couple of months. Also looking at sort of debt options as well as equity. To give you a sense, one customer in the solar space is about 10 times larger than the entire industry is today. So just by the fact that we're going after these large area applications means that we have a pretty big, production challenge ahead, because, this technology is nanomaterials. These are nanoparticles. So it's kind of novel manufacturing processes that can leverage old equipment. So it's not completely new, but there's a lot of unknowns about how low we can get our costs and how we can efficiently scale, et cetera. And being up in Los Alamos, it's a town of less than 20,000 people. It's a challenge to find those sorts of infrastructure components up there. So we're looking obviously beyond Los Alamos County for all of that. The state, I could talk for days about how business friendly New Mexico is. There's all sorts of incentives. We take advantage of many of them, including the Job Training Initiative Program. JTIP is probably one of the best. But we did have a LEDA project back in 2017. We closed out, I think last year, the year before, successfully. We met our hiring goals there. There's the R&D credits, the high wage credits. There's the National Lab associated programs like NMSBA and Trigger. We have an ongoing Trigger right now. We did an NMSBA last year, both with Los Alamos. And so I could talk more about those. And I did want to give one quick shout out to something that we're doing at South by Southwest this year to help promote New Mexico as a place to do business, called the New Mexico House. A couple of the organizers are here. We've got some sponsors, tentatively including Los Alamos, a couple of VCs, I think City of Santa Fe, where we're trying to sort of build the case on the more of a global platform like South by Southwest for New Mexico being a great place to do business. And we had one pitch competition there in 2019, closed our Series A in 2020. Last year, we won an innovation award, and shortly after had the first close for our Series B. So we're helping spread the news that New Mexico is actually very business friendly, a great place to start and grow a business. And, hopefully we're providing an example of that.
So first, what Pajarito Powder does is we make catalysts for the hydrogen economy. We believe the best catalysts in the world for that. And our stage is we licensed technology from both Los Alamos. That's where the original idea came from. But our main technology came from UNM. And so again, this is very, very New Mexico based. And when we licensed that technology, there were scientists that would work for like 2 weeks and make 1 gram of this catalyst. And we've scaled that up. So we're in the scaling phase. We have scaled that up over 3 orders of magnitude, probably working on 4, maybe 5, depending on how you measure things. And there's just a lot of demand on both the creating hydrogen and using hydrogen side of it. We do catalysts for both of those, and there's a lot of demand all over the world for this. Our primary investor, our biggest investor is Hyundai Motor, and we're working with them pretty closely. We've also got we're on Series B3. It probably should be a Series C by now, but it's been complicated. But our investment has come from strategic partners, Hyundai being the biggest one, a couple of others that you may not have heard of. And being in New Mexico, actually, I could tell you a different story about some of the other companies I've been involved with. But for this company, being in New Mexico has been great. I mean, it's again, we've got our technology from UNM. The state has been very helpful. We've gotten LEDA grants, JTIP, I don't even know what to call them, some other grants. The city has been very supportive. So I can't complain at all about this particular company. Again, if you want me to complain, I'll talk about another company later. But for this company, New Mexico has been a great place to start and build this.
At Flow Aluminum, we're building up our own lab over east side of the city and figuring out how to go from the lab to scale. We're aiming for grid energy storage, which is a large market and does also require significant production capability. And that's a problem we're getting into. So we're just getting into our seed round now that is hoping to close in the next few months. And thus far, the biggest 2 things, I think, the biggest 2 advantages from being in New Mexico have been, first, the various programs we've taken advantage of with, I think, the common thread being JTIP is particularly well appreciated. And also the large pool of intelligent people here. The universities and the national labs have been where we've gotten most of our employees thus far, of the small number we have at our stage.
So I'd like to, pull on that string a little bit. So what are you, so the universities and the national labs represent a very large talent pool. In fact, I think at least three of us up here, I'm not quite sure if you came from New Mexico State, but
Aggies, go Aggies.
Go Aggies, but I'm a Lobo, go Lobos. But I would like to hear your viewpoint on both how the national labs, because they employ tons of engineers. We have tons of engineers. We've heard people talk about how we recruit all these talent. Do you see that as, do you always see them as a source of talent? Do you ever see them as competitors for your talent?
Yes. Yeah, we see both. There's a lot of, well, I'll say that the national labs, I don't see a lot of back and forth. When we first, again, the first technology we looked at was out of Los Alamos, and I was down in their basement and talking to their technologists about this. And I asked them if any of them wanted to spin out and be the CTO, because that's not my area of expertise. And they wouldn't make eye contact with me. But at UNM, when I went there, I asked the same question. I had two guys going, pick me, pick me. So I think there's a level of, there's a culture, different culture at for instance, Sandia versus Los Alamos versus UNM that makes it really different about how you deal with that. So, but it's been both a source and a drain and kind of a more of nothing than anything.
Well, yeah, it's kind of a complicated question. In the early stages of the business as a technology centric company, we're tapping scientists. The first 5 people that I hired, I guess including myself, all had PhDs. And not only that, they had done postdocs. 3 of us had done postdocs at Los Alamos. And that's great in those early days because you're trying to prove the technology, make some progress in terms of showing viability, et cetera. But as time goes on, you need more folks to do all sorts of other things that there's not as much of that talent necessarily, especially in Los Alamos, engineers with scale up experience or business development people with partnership experience, salespeople with sales experience. And so you have to recruit those people, in a lot of cases to the state. And it was one reason why I'm so grateful they evolved the JTIP program. It's a less of an incentive for out-of-state recruitment, but there's still a benefit to, you can get some support to train out-of-state hires as well. During those early days, there's a lot of skepticism about our ability to recruit people to the state. New Mexico hasn't necessarily had the best reputation over the years, I guess, from outside the state. I think it's improved a lot, but I always push back against that just because of the quality of life, especially in Los Alamos, in my opinion. We've got a golf course a couple minutes from my house. We've got a ski area 20 minutes from my house. We got 300 plus days of sunshine. Similar down here, right? It's a great place to live and work. And so recruiting people to the state hasn't been that bad. You have to have, relocation packages and have a competitive salary, which, is not always easy. But we just, for example, recruited a CFO from Connecticut. We recruited a chemical engineer from Houston, from the oil and gas industry, just in the last basically 3 weeks. So it can be done. It's not trivial to convince those people, and you may have to cast a wide net, a broad funnel. As far as competing with the lab, if you asked me a couple of years ago, I might be a little bit bitter about it. With the big boom in hiring at Los Alamos with the weapons program, there's been escalation in salaries. When I was a postdoc there, I think I was making like 70,000 or so, but right now it's closer to 100,000. So it's almost 50% higher salary for postdocs. And so just hiring a postdoc, is that much more expensive because they're not going to take a pay cut to go to industry, right? And it was in 2023, it's kind of painful. We lost, I think, 3 folks to the weapons program, and they're apologetic and said it wasn't personal, it's just about the salary, and I couldn't match the salary. So I was a bit bitter at that time, but we've had just as many people join our team from Los Alamos. So I think it goes both ways. It's not a fit for everybody, depending on what your career ambitions and your background is set up for. You may not want to be a career labbie, and vice versa. The high-paced, high-risk intensity of a startup is not for everybody either. So I think it's pretty even. We're getting just as many people from the lab now as have been sort of taken from us. And I always have to remind myself that you don't lose a person to getting poached really. They have to apply for a job, right? So the people that left were looking for a job, right? That's the fact of it. So, good for them. So they leveled up their career. At least they got something they were looking for. And, that created a vacancy and we were able to find someone that was a better fit for those roles. And so it's worked out both ways.
I think that our experience has been fairly similar, a give and take, that we've gotten one of our employees is from Sandia, which is in a lot of respects a closed black box as far as in and out. But it's the same thing. It's what you said, that the people who we've taken are people who are more interested in something fast-paced, in something where they can make a lot of concrete, tangible impact on the development of a technology, and where there is significant freedom to do so. And those we've lost are more interested in something structured, in something where the objectives are predefined instead of determined by the needs of the day and the needs of the technology. So I have no animosity towards these places.
I'm glad no one has any animosity. I wasn't looking for animosity, but so we also have companies at multiple stages. And so Chris, you mentioned that Flow Aluminum is at the stage of getting to scale. Do you guys, and also, Hunter and Paul, could you guys reflect on what your plans are for going to scale? Will there be manufacturing, a factory of QDOTs, of catalysts inside of New Mexico, which would really foster the growth for a large part of the population that isn't necessarily a business specialist or a scientist?
It's early for us. We want there to be. We want there to be for a few reasons. Part of it is that the founding team are all New Mexicans, and we want to make something for New Mexico, not just for ourselves. Then outside of that, there's a lot of smaller factors. I don't particularly want to move, and that's a small thing, but it is a thing. And a larger version of that is we're familiar with the environment here. We know what resources we can rely on, and we know who to go to when we don't know what resources to rely on. That's not something we would have in another state, and so we wanted to stay here.
We do have manufacturing. It's a done deal, and we're scaling that up pretty aggressively right now. Again, like we've already scaled, like I said, many orders of magnitude, and we're trying to do about another 2 orders of magnitude here. And it's planned to be right now. It's planned to be here. Now it may be that our customers, a lot of our customers are overseas. Both in Asia and in Europe, and it may be that we build a factory, in Asia when we run out of space. We just moved into the space about a year ago. We're already looking at maybe it being too small. We're manufacturing here for the time being and continue to scale. So we're there.
Yeah, I mean, we're scaling right now as well. And the intent is to continue to scale in the state. We're talking about tons, like a ton or 2 of material a year. Currently, the entire industry today consumes about 40 tons for just mostly TVs of quantum dots of the purified material. But like I mentioned, we've got one customer that's talking about 500 tons a year demand. So it's pretty scary to go build all that capacity until you've got very firm commitments from those customers. And usually there's a gap between what they say their demand forecast is versus what they're actually willing to sign up for as far as like an actual commitment. So we're negotiating that and working, to find the middle ground. Just to give you a sense, it's pretty lean manufacturing of nanomaterials. A facility that could produce about 100 tons per year would cost about $10 to $15 million. So it's not crazy, and maybe be on the order of 20,000 square feet or something. That then can go into maybe as much as tens of millions, if not approaching 100 million square meters of in product a year. So a little bit goes a long way. And yeah, that capacity just doesn't exist in the world. I mean, there are tool manufacturers for all sorts of other things, but this is a little bit nuanced, a little bit specific. And even just walking down the road with these partners, we have to deliver huge amounts of material for them to do high volume manufacturing trials and tests, and the need to show reproducibility, to pretty high precision in some of these markets. So we have to scale up just to develop the technology anyway. And at the end, we might as well just continue to make it. It kind of gets at the business model, which maybe we can get into later on in the discussion. But with advanced materials, you have a couple different options for what kind of business model you could have. And we tend to think that being a part of the value chain is critical to our success to maintain a value capture. The material is very enabling, so there's a lot of other options there, but somebody's going to have to make the enabling material, and might as well be us. So that's our perspective. And New Mexico, has all the research, the lowest cost of energy. So that's a big input when you're manufacturing. Relatively low cost of labor, very dry climate, which for our technology makes a big difference. I assume for you guys too, but just naturally being in a very dry climate, you don't have to have those additional controls. So there's a lot of things going in New Mexico's favor as far as manufacturing, and we don't see any reason not to build it here. There's a lot of talk about co-locating with customers and stuff, but the customers are kind of all over the world anyway, and logistics aren't that bad. I mean, Los Alamos is another story, but being in Albuquerque is a very likely answer for at least one of our sites. So logistics in and out of Albuquerque are pretty straightforward.
And that was thanks for the answer. It's very informative. Now that you mentioned the business model, I know I kind of chatted with you about that earlier. Can each of you essentially, rather than pitch your company from the technology, forward, explain in plain terms what the business model is for the technology to market?
Yeah, well, investors kind of drill you down on as a technical founder, they just assume that the technology works. They hardly ask any questions about that. You've got some patents and plenty of papers, and your impact factor is whatever it is, not zero. So you must know what you're doing. They care a lot more about the business model. How are you going to make money? And I think that's what actually separates the winners from the losers in most cases, of the business model innovation. Our thesis is that our value as a company, and ultimately we are funded by investors, venture capital. I've got some in the audience here, demand that we deliver shareholder value. And in our thesis is that that's going to be driven by revenue growth. So it's about revenue maximization. If you're in a advanced material technology, you're at very far upstream, right? That material is then compounded into a polymer or whatever, and then it's cast into a film, and then the film is put into a device or whatever it might be. So the end market might be billions of dollars. I mean, display industry is a great example of this. 30 million or so TVs sold with quantum dots. That's about 30 billion, $40 billion in revenue that Samsungs of the world are achieving. But that company making just the additive, that just the quantum dots at the beginning, they have to worry about all the markups in the supply chain, and it's very convenient just to focus on their one thing, but then they're at the mercy of the supply chain. It's maybe a high margin business, but a low revenue business. And so that quantum dot business on 30 billion in final sales might be only 30 million, 50 million in just quantum dot sales. So our approach is to look for ways to go downstream and then file IP very aggressively at all steps in the value chain, so that if we need to, we can go insist on a royalty, at the end or somewhere in the middle. We don't want to have the royalty be marked up and kill the unit economics. So you have to think carefully about it. And everyone always says the margins are the best in the middle of the supply chain, but the revenue is obviously the best at the end of the supply chain. So we tend to lean as far downstream as we can and look for markets where we can get away with that. In TVs, you're never going to be able to make a final product and sell that at Best Buy. I mean, we don't have the brand, the know-how, the supply chain, any of that. So that's just not possible in the display industry. But in the greenhouse film industry, it's pretty much green field for us. There's not very many competitors. It's a very simple supply chain: quantum dots, master batch, film, and then you're done. And we had to prove the technology out. So we built relationships with some of the biggest growers in the world and some of the film manufacturers, et cetera. So we're already making this stuff anyway, just to prove the technology out. Might as well just slap a trademark on it, a brand, and continue to sell. And so that's what we're doing with that product. And then you're capturing, you're talking about dollars per square meter instead of like cents per square foot or something, depending on the, in terms of the the way you're selling the product. But so we're always trying to go further than just the quantum dots. There are some markets where we can't get away with doing more than that, but it is a pretty simple, we're selling stuff business model, but we want to sell stuff for the most dollars per, enabling material, which is our core competency, and then filing patents, I would say mostly on the end products, so that we can go demand our value capture, enforce our position in the market with the IP. And then you have to be strategic about where you file. That's a whole nother, topic, but yeah, maximizing revenue is our strategy.
So we have two major markets that we sell into. One is in the hydrogen economy. There's the hydrogen production side, and that's really booming right now with the it's really energy storage for renewable energy, right? It has to be stored, otherwise it doesn't work. And a lot of people want to begin to store that in hydrogen. And so our catalysts, we're somewhat like you, right? We're a supplier of powder. We make powder, and we make, many kilograms of it now, moving to metric tons of the stuff. So that's really selling stuff. And so we sell both of that. And once you create hydrogen, then you need to create electricity out of that. And we sell catalysts for that as well. That's the fuel cell side. And primarily our market is automotive companies for that, surprisingly, but that's who drives that market. So the business model now there's two things we do that's a little complicated here. One is we do catalyst support, where other people put some precious metal on top of our catalyst support. And the other is that we actually provide the catalyst, we put the precious metal on. And one of our claims to fame is we use a lot less precious metal than anybody else. So that is actually a better markup, right? So it's a little bit upstream from where we are, but we have no intention of getting then into the systems business or selling cars, for instance, that we don't have the capital to do that.
Batteries are another commodity, another stuff that can be sold. And they can be sold mostly to grid energy storage integrators, those who take batteries and then make out of them energy storage systems to store the amount of energy required for the grid to operate. And in the thesis of making money, the argument that we've chosen is that right now, that storage, the storage that exists, is almost entirely designed to discharge between 1 to 4 hours. And that's because lithium-ion batteries are very fast. And if you'd go slower than that, then you're losing or gaining less value for the same cost. And so we're making a technology that goes beyond 4 hours, that is less expensive, and thus more applicable to a new market with no current incumbents.
So, and I will get to audience questions. I have one last question. I have a feeling the audience might have a few more. So the next panel is going to be the state government panel. So we have some pretty good success stories here. The state's done a lot of right things. What could we improve in the state environment, in the New Mexico environment, that would allow for even more success, in your opinion, or would have made it easier in retrospect? And I'll ask Paul to start.
Okay, that's getting me in trouble.
You don't have to complain.
Yeah. No, actually, there's I think it's more of a general thing, right? Because there's only so many PhD electrochemists here that UNM produces, right? And we don't get all of them, and so we have to bring people in from out of state. And UNM's been great. We're getting chemists and stuff from UNM and NMSU, even Tech. Some we're getting people, but we have to bring people in from out of state. And the reputation of New Mexico is hard to overcome, right? The education is challenging. The crime is challenging. The fact that for many years, I don't know how it is now, but for many years, young people were leaving the state, right? And so to have people, to bring people in, it's challenging. So it's really just a big general thing is we need to solve the education and we need to solve crime. And that'll help us get more people in. Beyond that, I'm really thrilled with the support that New Mexico has given us. So yeah, that would be my answer.
I don't think I have a lot of input here. We're early enough that I think some of the pitfalls that you've experienced aren't ones that we've run into yet. And so I don't have a good standing to complain about them.
Well, I had two ideas. I guess one is at the very beginning, there's a big need for just having lab space that's available for early stage businesses. Sort of a fluke that we exist. We started in the New Mexico Consortium Biolab, if you guys are familiar with that up on the Hill, which was a consortium between 3 research universities, UNM, I think New Mexico Tech, NMSU maybe, had all gotten together to create a critical mass of bioscientists, researchers there in Los Alamos. And that was quasi-successful. They had only filled about half the space. And I was starting a company right at that time. And so they're like, well, come use one of the labs and get an office. Currently, that is completely taken over by Los Alamos. So there is no startup space there anymore. And it was just like a slither of time where they actually did that with I think there were 5 companies that started shortly after. We were the first one. And one of those had a huge exit that's not, I don't think, widely known in the state. The others, I think, are still going. But that avenue is no longer there. And Los Alamos is a special case. I think there's more options in Santa Fe and probably a lot more down here. But in those early stages, it's really hard to get the resources you need. We did an access for equity deal. So New Mexico Consortium is actually one of our largest shareholders. It's kind of crazy to think how much value they have from that at the very beginning, but it was critical. If I didn't have that, then the company wouldn't exist. So in the early stages, I think lab space is really helpful. And then where we are today, like I mentioned, we're recruiting people from out of state, and the state has provided a very strong incentive for us to hire people in the state. And we try very hard to find people, but a lot of the folks that we're looking for these days, like the CFO that we just hired, they just aren't here in the state. And it's a huge asset to the state to bring those people in. They're buying houses. Our business development chief commercial officer guy, Mike Burrows, moved out from North Carolina. He was at DuPont 4 years ago. He and his family, got 3 kids, are very happy in Los Alamos. They love it. He calls Los Alamos a life hack, and maybe New Mexico in general is a life hack. So once they're here, they kind of get it, but getting them here is expensive and hard. And then the state almost penalizes you a little bit. At least JTIP is about half as lucrative, and you can't use it for relocation and stuff. So I think that maybe the state could revisit that. I'm glad that they're at least even enabling it to be used for out-of-state hires, because they weren't previously. But it could be sort of more even. And I just kind of remind the state, like, I came in from out of state. I'm not going anywhere. My family is totally New Mexico based. My kids are all born here now. We're not going anywhere. So I think recruiting them to the state, it does sort of look bad maybe in a way, because you're using taxpayer dollars here in the state to support folks that didn't live here. But then, they're bringing the knowledge with them, their expertise, and they're helping the state level up its reputation and its game. So I think there's maybe some opportunity there. But honestly, the state does so much for companies. It's like, can't really complain. There are a ton of incentive programs. I rattled off a bunch of them that just simply don't exist in other states, or at least are smaller. So could the state do more? But they're doing plenty, I think, right now.
Can I add to mine? Right, because there is another one that I should have mentioned, and that's money. You can get seed stage and Series A money here in New Mexico. Trying to get Series B and Series C when you're trying to raise tens of millions, it's virtually impossible. It's not completely impossible. It's virtually impossible to do that. We've had to go out of state to do that, and it would be nice to get beyond that valley of death with New Mexico investment.
Agreed. And thanks for all the answers. I'd like to open the panel for questions from the audience. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, no? Lisa.
Talk about the BenuBio story.
Yeah, BenuBio is actually, we're sort of that stage where we're a B1, B2 round company. And we're raising money, selling product. doing quite well by any standard. But we do need that investment to go to the next level. 20, 30 million would be nice. I don't want to speak exactly in exact terms because that's not my job anymore. But it has been challenging. One of the reasons I was so focused on manufacturing is we, as a high-end instrumentation company, because we're selling essentially high-end flow cytometry type of equipment, have found it challenging to find all the manufacturing necessary to put together our products locally. So we end up having to source things from a distance, which is not ideal when you need to have some control over manufacture. And so those sort of challenges led to the interest in manufacturing. But I agree with Paul that the biggest challenge has been getting from that early B stage to C stage, because there's a certain stage where you need 30 to 50 million. And, you know, this is me just being the typical academic, but I mean, I've seen other companies in other cities with nowhere near the technology New Mexico companies have simply raise $50 million on a hat. And it's amazing to me that it's difficult and it's not clear why.
Well, yeah, we had a 4-year gap between our Series A and Series B. Its average is like 2 or 3. So that, you know, that 4th year, 3rd year got kind of hairy. And of course, I'm out there raising money from the day we close our Series A, really. You know, they say the best time to raise money is after you just raise money. Anyway, yeah, it took a while. Wasn't easy. And I will say that the VC that led our Series A and the VC that led our Series B and some of the other largest investors did receive support from New Mexico SIC. So that's not a coincidence. And I think the SIC is doing more. Some folks are complaining that they could do way more. You know, the fund has doubled in size in the last, whatever it is, 5 years, 60 billion or something now. You know, and they're doing investments. So, but they're cutting bigger and bigger checks. So I think it's starting to come back, and they have some quasi requirements, maybe soft requirements, that the money has to be put to some portion of the money has to be invested in the state. And I think the VCs are taking that seriously. I was just talking to one yesterday that is opening an office in Santa Fe. It's a San Francisco based VC. They got a big check from the SIC, and now they're opening an office. So they seem to be taking it pretty seriously. And it's not just because of that. They actually see the value of having businesses in the state. So there's some progress there, but it's really hard. And if you meet a VC that just doesn't have any experience in the state, haven't visited the state, doesn't know, haven't talked to the SIC, they're going to look kind of negatively as a knee-jerk reaction on you being in New Mexico. Like, really? Why? Like, you know, why aren't you in Boston or Austin or San Francisco? Like, why don't you come visit and check it out? But it is a challenge for sure. But I think there's potentially some change happening in the positive direction there.
Yeah, I think this was covered a little bit earlier in an earlier panel where essentially it seems to be somewhat this the evolution of the environment. We are making progress. You know, 15 years ago, probably would have been really hard to get seed funding, but all of these efforts led, you know, like Rainforest, the state as a whole, it has gotten a lot better. I think the big gap that exists now, and I think it's been identified, is that, you know, the money that allows these wonderful companies that we have, BenuBio included, to scale to be able to stay without a major acquisition event or moving out of state. Any additional questions from the audience?
Hi, I'm a research engineer looking to. I graduated from UNM. I moved to Silicon Valley, and I'm looking to bring my robotics and AI and education startup back to New Mexico. And as I start to attend, you know, events like this and learn more about entrepreneurship, I find that for every one thing I know about robotics and AI and machine learning, there are 2 or 3 things that I don't know about entrepreneurship. And I see that, you know, Chris, your experience seems very familiar, and Hunter, the things you've expressed today really show where I'd potentially like to be in a few years. But maybe you can talk about how you started, maybe like right after your postdoc or right after your PhD, Chris. Yeah.
Oh, I sort of tumbled into this, which is, I think, the sort of thing that would be funny 5 years from now to say, but is not something that I say when in the serious business meetings, that I started researching the technology that we're now commercializing as a PhD student. And then it was more interesting than my advisor thought. And so she pushed me, hey, you should go compete in this event. You should compete in this pitch event. I did better than I expected. Hey, you should join this accelerator program. And so I did. And that's where I met my co-founder, Tom Chepikavage, who unfortunately could not be here today. And two of us made something out of it. So I've learned a lot from specifically the Lobo Rainforest and the efforts here to teach UNM students like me how to be an entrepreneur.
So yeah, I was a postdoc, got my PhD, was a postdoc at Los Alamos, and had a lot of papers, was on a pretty good trajectory. I think I submitted 50 to become like a professor. I submitted like 50 applications, and I was interviewing for about, I think 3 of them had gotten to nearly the final step when I started the company. So I wasn't like I was trying to be an entrepreneur or I was had some sort of plan. I just, in those interviews, and thinking more and more about it, I realized that this was probably going to be more fun. I'm a risk taker. I want to have an impact. So I just said like, okay, let's go for it. If I'm ever going to do it, now's the time. So yeah, and there was also some other factors that were pretty serendipitous. We had a CRADA, Corporate Research and Development Agreement at Los Alamos with Sharp Corporation. So they were helping fund the research and taking it in more of an industrial direction that I was doing anyway. And then they fell on hard times. Sharp was sold in kind of a fire sale to Foxconn. It was a jewel Japanese industry, and then now is owned by a Taiwanese company. And they had pulled back on all their exploratory research, and they waived their rights to the IP. So the Tech Transfer Office, I wouldn't say they were encouraging me to start a company, but they were wanting to, talk about it or explore it. Like they were open to it. And I almost felt like it was kind of my like duty to like take the technology to market, because it was not going to happen anytime soon if I didn't. So it was sort of like, I better do this, because I there were some aha moments where I was like, this has a lot of potential. This is really promising. And then Sharp wasn't going to carry the torch. And I was kind of realizing around that time that I probably wouldn't be too happy as a professor. And I was right. And at each step in my career, I think I pretty much just chose the thing that seemed the most fun, and that served me well. So, I mean, there's a lot more, to it, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, especially in those early years, which is, maybe a topic for another day. But yeah, technical founders starting companies is a steep learning curve. It's very different, kind of research, kind of everything. And investors don't like to invest in first-time technical founders because you're basically paying for their education. It's going to be a number of years before they figure things out, and it was the case with us too. So yeah, it's a long, messy story. Things have really accelerated in the last, say, 4 or 5 years. But
So in my view, you need to get over the concept that you need to know what you're doing. Because none of us know what we're doing. We're making it up as we go. I have been part of a CEO group, a peer advisory group, and some of these people are phenomenally successful, and they keep talking about how they're just making it up. They're still just making it up. It's a matter of entrepreneurship is a matter of doing. Entrepreneur is a verb. There's only so much you can learn. Surround yourself with good advisors. Peers is another one I would recommend. Find some other startup folks and get together with them. Get hooked up with Drew. I don't know if Drew's still here at the New Mexico Angels. They have a lot of mentorship. Do a lot of that kind of stuff. But if you're waiting to feel like, yeah, I'm ready, you're never going to start it. So just do it.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. And with that, I'd like to thank our panel for an excellent discussion, and we'll move forward.